Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of TDA Talks. I'm Kim Wardle, Global Commercial Director at TDA, the talent agency specializing in design, product, and tech. Thanks so much for tuning in as we dive into conversations with top industry leaders about the future of design, innovation, and leadership. I'm excited today to be joined by Michael Kopcsak, Head of Product Design at Walmart International. Michael, thank you for being here. But before we jump in, could you kick things off with a quick intro and tell us a little bit about your current role at Walmart, as well as some highlights from your career and journey so far, please?
I think I'll start with the fact that I started my career in consulting, and I worked for a large design agency, and that actually was foundational for me in my career because one of the benefits of being in consulting is you get to a view into a bunch of different industries, right? So you get to learn about a bunch of different kinds of organizations and a bunch of different, structures and product applications and cultures of those client companies. And that was foundational for me in my career. So then I sort of quickly pivoted directly into software and I worked sort of in Silicon Valley. I've been in Silicon Valley for 25 years and worked at Symantec and Microsoft. Microsoft, I led design for what is now Outlook.com. And that was exciting to have that was the first time I had a user base of, 500,000 people. No, excuse me, 500,000,000 people. And, when you're working at that scale, that was, really, really interesting. And your ability to experiment extremely limited. And the scale at which you're shipping bits, as they would say at Microsoft, was really exciting. Worked in small business accounting at Intuit, and then kind of quickly moved into high tech space, VMware and Cisco, where I worked on incredibly technologically heavy products and complicated user scenarios and complicated customer needs, and highly regulated industries like data center and compliance and networking, security. Those were foundational experiences that helped me understand what true value design-led approaches can have in places where it makes work more exciting and enjoyable cross-functionally. And then, of course, fast forward to what I'm doing right now at Walmart International, which is a combination of my enterprise background and consumer. So I'm sort of unique in that way. And I have product management experience in my background where I was actually a product manager for 4 years, in addition to leading design at the same time. And that gave me really interesting perspectives that I take into my daily work. Yeah.
Wonderful. Wow, very impressive. And looking back over your journey as a design leader, what would you say are some of the biggest lessons you've learned along the way?
That's a great question. I think it's really about leading with emotional intelligence. That's been a lesson that's been learned through making many, many mistakes. And I think when you kind of are early in your career, you're really about achieving things, delivering things, being on time, being recognized for what your competence is. But actually, over time, what I've really realized is that leading with empathy, understanding, and the ability to understand your own emotions and the emotions of your cross-functional partners, the emotions of your teams, the emotions of your customers or your users, the ability to manage that, understand and manage that, and recognize like when you need to change your approach is pretty much a critical success factor. And being willing to lead from a place of, genuine, authenticity. If you are leading from, a place of just trying to drive really hard, there's bodies along the way, and nobody wins in that scenario. You don't win. Of course, the people who are the bodies along the way don't really necessarily win. So it's really about leading with emotional intelligence. Build the ability to build strong and durable relationships. And when you're a senior design leader, you're often the only design person in the room. And your ability to deliver feedback to cross-functional partners, of which there might be many in the room, it can be really challenging and very daunting. So you have to have the courage and the skills to be able to do that because all of the people you represent that aren't in the room are counting on you to do it.
Absolutely. And I think I mentioned already, but you've had such an impressive career. What's something you're especially proud of when you reflect on your experience?
I think one of the things that I sort of like about my career is I am a team builder. So many times I'll come in and I'll have to build a team from scratch, or I'll have to retool a team. And, for example, at Cisco, I built an organization that built a lot of credibility in a highly technical landscape. In a place like Cisco, you are not a player if you don't deeply understand the technology and the use cases for that technology. So, as a design organization, we had to overcome that you're just surface, you're just late in the process to building an understanding that we actually understood the needs of the customers as well as the technology. So bringing that competence to the table and representing that in highly technical conversations with, some of the world's leading experts in that technology really built a lot of credibility. And that's something I'm really proud of. And so all of those people, when they would walk into their rooms, the design, the researchers, the content people, when they would walk into the room, they would feel confident that they had a role to play because they had the right foundations of the technology and the understanding and the landscape, which gave them a great deal of comfort and confidence. And I think most recently, the things I'm most proud of would be building an accessibility practice at Walmart International. And I'll just take a second to talk about that. I've been
Yeah.
in the design business for over 25 years, and you would think that and I grew up with a mother who was disabled, and one of my closest friends is in a wheelchair. And so you'd think that with all of that, I would have a greater sensibility of the needs of people with alternative technology needs. And I think I just truly didn't understand it until I sat through a bunch of usability studies. We worked with a company called Fable to run our accessibility studies. And I sat through some of those studies early in my tenure at Walmart, and I truly began to understand what it really meant.
Mm.
And we operate a sizable business in Canada, which has the world's largest, or I should say, the world's toughest compliance rules for
Mm.
accessibility. So we have a lot of legal and compliance risk in that country, financial and otherwise, and reputational risk. So building an accessibility practice was a necessity, but also it was the right thing to do. And sort of accessibility was always sort of like something we just sort of rubber stamped and went through,
Yeah.
as about compliance with WCAT or whatever. But truly understanding and watching the evolution of the product experience, that it became truly more accessible end to end for customers of a wide spectrum of needs, really is heartwarming and sort of made me realize what I wasn't paying attention to all those years and the importance of that.
This leads on really well to our next question then. So, for anyone out there who's aspiring to step into a leadership role, what are the three practical tips that you'd offer to help them guide them on their path?
Well, I think first is what's your motivation?
Mhm.
Right. If your motivation is purely financial or status, that's the wrong reasons to get into leadership because often you have to, there's the phrase that leaders eat last, right?
Yeah.
And I truly take that to heart. So to me, leadership is about, service to others. And if you're in it because of financial rewards and status, you're automatically coming from what I would consider the wrong place. So if you're someone who loves being recognized for your individual contribution, you should really seriously reflect on what motivates you and what makes you feel whole in your day to day. Because if that's where your sort of satisfaction lies and your kind of love language is affirmation in that place, that's probably not a great fit for you in leadership because you have to be willing to most of the time not get recognized for the things that you're doing. And you're sort of in the background in a lot of cases, not getting recognized by even your team for all the things that you're doing on their behalf. And you have to be okay with that. And your motivation has to be about getting joy and satisfaction over the success of others. And if you can connect with that, if that's truly, where you come from as a human, you're on the right path. I think the other practical tip I would give is qualify any opportunity. Don't just jump into it because, oh, it's a really reputable brand and everybody knows this company. And, all my friends will be like, oh, you work here, or my parents or my friends or whatever. It's not really about that. You have to look at the attributes of the opportunity and really qualify it for what do you need out of your career? What motivates you? What's the domain space? Is it something that you can get up and be excited about day in and day out? Because as a leader, if you're not excited, it shows. And people can see right through you.
Yeah.
And you can't fake it till you make it. You pretty much have to be, at least emotionally invested in the work that you're doing and the work that your team is doing. And if you're not there, then don't take the opportunity. It's just not going to work out long term. And the other one is, recognize you're going to make mistakes. And we're human.
Yeah.
And for any Americans out there, there's the game of baseball, and there's the role of the pitcher, and the pitcher like throws a ball, and if they make a mistake, they can't think about that mistake when they throw the next ball because it will mean they'll kind of mess up on that second ball that they throw. So it's literally from pitch to pitch, you have to forget what just happened. So the metaphor is like remember what is meaningful, but don't let those mistakes override the thing you're going to do next, right? Just put it in perspective, put it off the side, learn from it, but don't dwell on it. Be willing to move on from mistakes pretty quickly.
Lovely. Great tips. Thank you. And with remote and globally distributed teams becoming the norm now, what are some of the key lessons you've learned about leading and scaling teams across different time zones and locations?
Well, as someone who's been leading teams globally for, oh gosh, 20 years, this is hard. This is hard stuff, you
Yeah.
know. I read a while back, I read a book called The Culture Map by Aaron Meyer, and I would highly recommend that book to anyone because, fundamentally we're all human, but the circumstances in which we grew up, the educational systems that produced us as professionals, the family background that we have, all of that comes together to make who we are. And you can't expect other people to understand that out of the gate. So, reading a book like The Culture Map will really give you sort of like a game plan to try and understand about different cultures, where those people are coming from. It's not going to be perfect and it's not going to be foolproof, but it at least gives you a baseline where you can start to understand the other, I'll say. And communication is really hard. If your primary way of communicating is in an environment like this, like in Zoom,
Yeah.
and you never meet physically, like that's a practical reality in many, many companies today or organizations. So, with budget restrictions for travel and whatnot. So you have to be willing to go the extra mile. And in many cases, work to build a personal connection with the people you're working with, understand them as people and, uh, you know, it's, you know, anything can go sideways really quickly. And you have to understand that, everybody is hopefully coming from a place of positive intent. And you have to learn how to disagree respectively across cultures, as well as, sort of understanding how to influence across different countries. What motivates people in that part of the world, right? What motivates people in this part of the world? And the biggest mistake I see people from so the Western part of the world make is assume everybody else thinks like them. And, it's easy because popular culture is very dominated by Western cultural norms. And the reality is like it's not really like that, in other parts of the world. So seek to understand the other people on the other side, where they're coming from, what motivates them, about their culture, and celebrate those aspects of their culture and recognize that you appreciate aspects of their culture and always look for feedback. Be willing to give it, be willing to receive it, and assume positive intent. The last thing I would mention in terms of working across regions is be flexible. Oftentimes, you'll see that folks, like say in the United States, will optimize for their lives and their calendars in terms of like meeting in off hours, so to speak. And what I've found is that doesn't necessarily land very well on the other side. So I would highly suggest any team that's working across all these time zones, be flexible and don't always put the sort of pain on one side of that equation, meaning one team is always meeting, when they're not at their best or in the off hours, so to speak. If there's, a sort of like a shared pain on that, you're more likely going to get people at different times when they're at their best because, let's be honest, who's really great at 10 o'clock at night, having worked all day. So, the last tip is really about being willing to mix up the schedule so that that pain is shared.
Yeah. And how do you do that with, you're on West Coast time zone. Are there certain tips and tools that you use to make sure that works really well for you and the
Yeah, I
team?
think Yeah, well, for me as an individual, when I meet with people in my teams in other geographies that are on the other side of the world, and so the opposite schedule, if you will, I always set those meetings up at late at night for me, so that I get those people when they're at their best. Now, I try and be at my best at 10 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock at night. It may not be, but I show respect. I want to let them know that. I want to talk to them when they're at their best. So as a leader, I inconvenience myself, visibly so that people don't feel like I'm inconveniencing them. And that's part of the servant leadership ethos that I have. And that's something I would encourage anyone to do. You can't do that for every single meeting. Like some of the bigger meetings, you kind of have to be standard. But if you're meeting on one-on-ones or with small groups, demonstrate that flexibility that goes a long way with people where they understand, hey, this person's meeting with me late at their night. They're willing to do that for me, and it goes a long way. And sort of bridging that cultural understanding.
Yeah, and that goes back to the empathy piece as well in design and leadership. So wonderful,
Absolutely.
thank you. And to wrap things up, let's have a little bit of fun. What's something most people don't know about you?
Um, Uh, we have a family brand. My
Ah,
family, we actually have a trademark brand. And so when my wife was growing up, her father used to do this funny thing where he would take the first two letters of his kids' names and make words. And he would do things with those words. And so when we had all of our kids, and they all have X's in their names, and my wife put the first two letters of all of their names together and made a word, and that became our family brand. So there's five members of my family.
yeah.
Um, We've all agreed to get the tattoo with that word, our family brand, on our bodies. So two of us have done it, three to go. So and like I make beer, and my brewery is named after that brand. And we raise chickens, and when my wife gives our eggs away, she puts a little stamp with that same brand on it. And when I make ice cream, I make packaging that has that brand on it. And it's just kind of a fun thing. And when you drive up to our property in the mountains in Santa Cruz, Mountains, California, we have a big sign that, Corten steel that has that branding on it. And, our whole identity is about that brand. And that's just kind of a fun thing that we do as a family. And, we've got swag, we got t-shirts and hats and, all kinds of stuff. So,
I love that. That is so fun. Can you tell us what the brand name is? Are you
uh,
famous? You're going to be famous now?
it's actually
Oh,
like here in my arm.
oh
It's Bodaxu. That's
my
how
God.
it's
Bodaxu.
Bodaxu. So Bodaxu. Yeah.
I need to get a picture of that and put it next to the interview so people can see it.
I got a picture I put on Instagram I can send you.
Love it. Thanks, Michael. That's awesome. Now, sadly, that's all we've got time for today, but thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me. And to our listeners, tune in to the next TDA Talks. Thank
Thanks.
you.
I appreciate the time.
Thank you.